So you said a little while ago that Will loved Dr. Smith. Why?
I'm trying to think of the answer to that question, because I think it's definitely true. I think he did love Dr. Smith, and I don't know if there's a good reason. He certainly had very valid reasons to not trust him and to dislike him, but I think the sense of adventure that he discovered through Dr. Smith, you know, if it hadn't been for Dr. Smith being a catalyst to these crises that Will inevitably solved, his life would have been more boring, and he came to love Smith for that. Plus, they both had the connection of the robot. They were the two who could program and fix and had deep, meaningful relationships with that machine. So that was a bonding thing between them as well.
We've talked about most of the cast, and you mentioned this character before, but we would like to hear a little bit more about Debbie.
Debbie the Bloop. Debbie the Bloop was the only actor on Lost in Space who had 2 television series at the same time. Debbie was in Lost in Space, and she was also in Doctari. Lou Schumacher was the animal trainer who was responsible for Debbie. I also worked with Lou on many other projects over the years. He treated his animals as well as that era do, or, you know, he was okay. He was a nice guy. I never had any issues with Debbie. I mean, you know, when she was around, she would come over and hang out, you know, off camera. I mean, I have much fonder memories of being with Debbie, you know, just hanging around the set. I remember the feel of her wrinkly, strong fingers, you know. She had strength, and they were very wrinkly feeling and coarse. And she smelled good. I don't think she particularly disliked having the helmet. It was a helmet that kind of hooked underneath. I don't think it didn't really bother her. She didn't like, no, don't put that on me or I'm going to throw a little fit or anything like that. She was okay with it. There's a sad story about Debbie. Angela Cartwright's brother, Chris, who's younger than me, came to visit the set one day, and I can't remember the absolute catalyst or whatever, but Debbie bit him. And the next time Debbie came to work, she had been detoothed. And I remember Angela was like, oh no, you didn't do that because he bit my brother, did you, please? You know, maybe her brother, I don't know, he was probably 9 at the time. But they detoothed Debbie, and that was sad. Debbie ended up living a very long life, passing away less than 10 years ago at the San Diego Zoo. And, you know, I always liked working with animals, you know. Sometimes some are very likable and some are not. We had ostriches on the set of Lost in Space a couple of times, and they're heinous animals to work with. They spit, and they will kick multiple directions. I didn't want to get anywhere near those ostriches. Dogs are always great to work with, and Debbie was smart. She was cool.
Did you do a lot of promotion for the show?
No. There wasn't, did I do a lot of promotion for the show? I did quite a few talk shows at the time, and I guess the reason I was there was to promote the show when I think about it. You know, I did a lot of talk shows. I did quite a few telethons, you know, where you'd go in and like sing a song and promote the show. I played the Hollywood Bowl in 1965 in my silver spacesuit.
Talk about that.
It was Scout Day. It was hosted by Art Linkletter, and the Hollywood Bowl was absolutely jam-packed with Boy Scouts, Girl Scouts, Cub Scouts, and Brownies. There were a lot of different celebrity TV people who came out and either just did something or played a song or something, and I came out. We had done a lot of parades, you know, stuff like that. I didn't like the parades. The parades were always a drag. You're freezing at 4 in the morning going like this. I never liked the parades, but I did them. But the Hollywood Bowl, it was my first gig ever. It's been downhill ever since, really. But the kicker to this story is I came out with my guitar and I sang Tijuana Jail, which was a 1959 hit for the Kingston Trio. It's a song about going down to Mexico, getting drunk, getting arrested, and being thrown in jail where you're stuck. And that was what I chose to play and sing to this audience of Scouts. And what really, truly blows my mind is that my father, my mother, Art Linkletter, the promoter, the sound guy, nobody ever said to me, "Hey, Billy, why don't you do This Land Is Your Land?" Or, "Hey, Billy, why don't you do Jesse James? Why don't you do a different song? You know a lot of those Kingston Trio songs. Are you sure you want to do Tijuana Jail?" And I'm so glad that that was my choice. I love that little trivia of, yeah, no, that's what I'm playing. Tijuana Jail. So that's the truth, that's what happened, and so be it.
You played such a clean-cut character, and as you were saying earlier, the world was changing wildly during that time period. What was it like for you in terms of your public image? Did people expect you to be Will Robinson?
The friends that I had from the age of 5 were still my friends when I was doing Lost in Space. It was after Lost in Space when I went back to school, and I was still very much of that age. When I was like 14, I went back to public school for the 9th grade, and that was the challenge, you know, because I'm re-entering a society that I have been out of for 4 years, because I had done Dear Bridget and then Lost in Space and a few guest shots and stuff, and that was it. I was not in school, public school. I was on a trailer. So I'm back into public school, and that was a very challenging. Well, first of all, I think the 9th grade, being 14, is a very difficult, challenging time for anybody. You know, it didn't matter if you're a Little League pitcher or if you're a science geek or whatever, you know, you're puberty, and it's just a mess of a time. But I went back to public school, and there were a lot of people there that obviously kind of wanted to be my friend because I was Will Robinson, or I was a celebrity. Girls wanted to flirt with me because I was that guy on TV. Guys wanted to beat the shit out of me because I was that guy that the girls wanted to flirt with that was on TV. And I chose to work really hard when I first went back to school. I remember that conscious choice. I got all A's and B's when I first went back. And I didn't continue along that choice. But when I first went back, I was very cognizant of, I'm going to be good. I'm going to get good grades. I'm not going to hassle anybody, blah, blah, blah. You know, when I was out at gym class and stuff, I ran fast. I did the best I could to be as, you know, good as everybody else. I didn't, you know, so I wasn't a wimp. But it was towards the middle or the end of that first semester of going back to school that I formed a rock and roll band. And that gave me all the cred that I had hoped for, because here we were playing, you know, on the quad or in the auditorium or at an after gym dance thing, and here I was with a Rickenbacker guitar and 410 Standell behind me, and, you know, drums and like the Doors keyboard bass. Robert Hamer from Barnes & Barnes was, you know, playing keyboard, and another guitar player, Paul Gordon, and we were rocking. You know, I mean, we could legitimately play, and we were loud, and that made everything okay. It was like, okay, this guy's, you know, you can't hassle him. He's a rocker, and he's okay. But it was awful going back to public school. It was, you know, it was my choice to go back. As I said earlier, Angela had stayed at the studio, but I wanted to, you know, re-enlist in society. And anyway, I survived.
Do you have a favorite episode of the show?
I like a lot of the first season episodes. If I had to say one would be my favorite, it would be an episode called Return to Earth, because Will Robinson legitimately goes back to Earth. And he legitimately manages to get back to this planet they're stranded on with carbon tetrachloride, which was something, if they didn't have, they wouldn't be able to like purify their food or something like that. So the fact that he literally went back to Earth, and it was modern time, because there was another episode where we all went back to Earth, but it was kind of like a Roswell thing. We went back to Earth and it was 1947. But in this episode, Will goes back to Earth and nobody believes that he's really Will Robinson. And it was a very dramatic episode. It was black and white. It was a Christmas show. Yeah, I would say that would be my favorite episode.
Do you remember any censorship on the show?
No.
So we talked about the show coming to an end. In the 80s, you personally tried to launch a reunion movie, correct?
I did.
So what happened? Why didn't that come to be?
Well, in 1978 and 9, I collaborated with Paul Gordon, who's now a big Broadway writer, and a friend of ours, Brian Greer, on a project called Lost in Space, The Epilogue, which was simply to be a movie of the week. It was conceived as a movie of the week to resolve Lost in Space, because obviously it was never resolved. So we wrote this script, and I would say it leaned much more toward the tone of the first season. You know, it was more of a serious kind of an ensemble project. And I sent the script to all the cast members and told them that, you know, I'd like to make this happen, and what do you think? And I was given feedback from Jonathan, you know, well, you have to rewrite, I will rewrite Dr. Smith, and you'll carry on, blah, 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 blah. And I don't remember, I don't really remember specific feedback from the others, except it was kind of like, yeah, good luck, go ahead. So I wrote this script, and then I contacted, God, what was his last name? Andy, I can't think of his last name right now. It escapes me. But he had been a PA, an assistant on Lost in Space, and at this point in time, he was kind of running CBS. I'm embarrassed that I can't think of his name, because I will one day, and I'll go, why did I forget that? But right now it escapes me. I went to Andy at CBS, and I said, here's this project. It's a movie of the week. It resolves Lost in Space. What do you think? And he said, absolutely. Great. We'll do it. So I had kind of gone to the cast and the network with the script and this concept and said, and gotten positive feedback. Yeah, sure. So then I contacted Irwin Allen. Now, from the seat I'm in right now, I completely understand Irwin Allen's response. I really do. I get it. At the time, it hurt me deeply, and I didn't get it. I called him and I said, hey, Mr. Allen, I've written a script for a movie of the week. I've talked to the cast. I've talked to Andy at CBS. Everybody's very enthusiastic about it. I hope we can do it. I'd like to get it to you, you know, and see if we can move forward with this. And I had written television scripts by then that were produced. And Irwin immediately said to me, I won't read it. If you send it to me, don't send it to me. Lost in Space is mine. It is not yours. If I decide I ever want to return to Lost in Space, it will be my idea, my script, or I will have that script written by whoever I want it to be written by. There are only a handful of plot lines that logically will work for that project, so I will not read whatever you send me because I won't use it, and I don't want you to sue me. And I said, well, I remember saying to him, I was in my bedroom where I still sleep at night. I was looking out the window at the canyon ahead of me. And I remember saying to him, I would never sue you. This was a labor of love. I would never sue you. And he just said to me, and he really did, this is exactly what he said to me: if I ever decide to do a Lost in Space project, and if I want you to be a part of it, I will call your agent. Click. He was right, okay? He was right. Lost in Space isn't mine. Lost in Space was his. He had every right to say that to me. He wasn't sensitive about it. He wasn't necessarily rude about it. He was very businesslike about it. And he made his point perfectly clear. And he was right. At the time, I won't say it shattered me, because it didn't shatter me. But at the time, it hurt a lot, because I had worked really hard on the script. And I had taken a lot of notes from a lot of people to make the script better. And I thought that I'd kind of rallied the troops, and everybody was thinking, well, yeah, we can do this. The network wants to do this. So I was very, it was a downer. It was a bummer. But honestly, in reflection, he had every right to dismiss it the way he did. And I completely get it. It didn't happen, wasn't supposed to happen, but I get it. I totally get it.
What do you think the show's legacy is?
The legacy of Lost in Space? It's a wonderful canvas to let your imagination run loose in. And the heart of the story is family endures. And everyone in that cast, even Dr. Smith or the robot or Major West, is family.
So after the show ended, what did you want to do? Did you want to keep acting?
Oh yeah, I didn't think about not continuing acting at that point in time. I just turned 14 when Lost in Space ended, and I starred in a Disney movie that summer, called Rascal, with Steve Forrest, who I had worked with before, and I must say, Steve Forrest was a great guy. He was a really good actor, and he was a nice man, and he and I had a good chemistry together, and we did an hour-long Western when I was really young called Empire, about a rodeo rider who's going blind because he got kicked in the head or something too many times, and I played his son in that, and it was a good show. And then we did Rascal together, and we had some nice scenes together. Working with those raccoons was great, and they were magnificently excellent. I mean, there's a scene in Rascal, and Rascal was like a 12-week shoot. And it was directed by Norman Tokar. Norman Tokar had directed me in my favorite film 6 years previously called Sammy the Way Out Seal. And Norman Tokar, more importantly, directed almost 100 episodes of Leave It to Beaver, which hold up great. And I'm sidetracking here a bit, but Norman used to say to me, right before we would shoot Sammy the Seal and Rascal, and I know he said the same thing to Tony Dow and Jerry Mathers, he would just take me aside and he would say to me, think. Just think. You think about what we're doing. Just think. One word, think. I mean, the first couple of times he would say it to me, he'd say, okay, this is what's happening here. Think about it. And then it just became think. And to this day, I like to focus myself interior-wise just by, I'll say think, and I'll hear Norman say that. And it's a small, silly little one-word cue, but it focuses you, and it focused a kid very easily. It was very easy for a kid to just cut out the chatter and think. He was great. Norman was a good man. He had been the voice of Henry Aldridge on the radio as a youngster, and last time he's passed away, but the last time I saw Norman Tokar was the only time in my whole life I ever drank moonshine. He was dating a friend of mine's mother, and we went over there for dinner. He was living very close to my house in the Hollywood Hills, and we had dinner at the house and then sat out on his porch, and he said, "You ever had any moonshine?" I was probably like 25. He said, "You ever had any moonshine?" I was like, "No." He brought out this jar, this mason jar with clear stuff in it that, you know, was kind of like jet fuel. But that was the last time I saw Norman. It was nice.
In 1974, you were in the pilot episode of The Rockford Files.
Mm-hmm.
What was that experience like?
It was only a couple of days' work. James Garner, I only worked with him. I did 2 episodes of The Rockford Files, but I only worked with him a few days. So I don't want to say he was like Jimmy Stewart, because that was somebody I had a really close relationship with for months, and I carried on a relationship with Mr. Stewart over the years. But James Garner was like that in the sense that here was a completely at ease man, totally professional, no possible air of fabulousness about him, ready to go to work, polite to everybody, and absolutely was having fun. Absolutely was having fun. And I've worked with a lot of people that are television icons, and some of them were not fun. And he is. I haven't seen him in 30 years, but he's obviously still here. He was a pleasure to work with. Very professional and very pleasant, and no airs of anything.
Was there a sense like this is going to be a hit? Or that show hadn't even aired yet, obviously.
I didn't, I wasn't invested in it. I was playing Lindsay Wagner's brother. I was a pharmacist, I think. And Lindsay was real nice. It was just it was probably one day. It was just a little easy gig. And then I was doing a series at Universal called Sunshine, and the head of casting called me one day and said, and I think this was the 2nd season of The Rockford Files, he just called me and said, "Hey, Bill, there's a little part in this episode of The Rockford Files. Will you please do it? Jackie Cooper's directing it." And I jumped at the chance to work with Jackie Cooper. I mean, Jackie Cooper was Jackie Cooper, and certainly I was not of that ilk, but we were in that popular child actor club, and I loved the Little Rascals and that stuff. So the opportunity to work with Jackie Cooper was something I didn't even think twice about. I immediately accepted with like, great, I would love to do that. And when I got to, it was a Venice Boardwalk, little toss-off art painter scene with Jim Rockford, and James Garner sees me and he goes, "Well, you were just you're Lindsay, you were in the other show." And I was kind of like, "Well, what are you saying?" They called and asked me to do it. What are you saying? And he said, "Give him some sunglasses." And they brought out these huge, really big Jackie Onassis kind of sunglasses because James Garner was kind of like, "Well, you've been this guy. We got to disguise you a little more." I was a little embarrassed or a little uncomfortable. It was kind of like, why are you doing a different character here?
It was only 14 episodes later. It was still in the first season.
Was it?
Halfway through the first season. So.
Yeah, so I can see why he would say, "What's up with this? Mumy, what are you doing here?" And I was like, "Don't blame me. They asked me to do it. You want me to leave? I'll leave. I wanted to work with Mr. Cooper here." Anyway.
We're going to make a big jump.
Okay.
And go to 1991.
Woo.
When you started writing music for Adventures in Wonderland.
Oh.
So tell us about that. How did that come about?
I'll try to make this segue as smooth as possible. In the 80s, I started making records and videos and films with Barnes & Barnes, which were very left of center, quirky, novelty-oriented stuff that was really not something that was called Bill Mumy. It was really like a secret identity, and it became successful mostly because of fish heads. Okay. We, Barnes & Barnes, had been friendly with and had gigged with Devo. And we were kind of in that early new wave, quirky Devo scene. We were certainly no Devo, but we were still in their little club. Mark Mothersbaugh called me on the phone and said, "Hey, I'm doing this Disney series and I need songwriters. Would you like to do it?" It was as simple as that. Would you like to do it? And I was like, yeah. You don't have to ask twice, because music is my passion, and my son was 2. He was 2 when we started that project. I wrote 125 songs for Adventures in Wonderland. The money was okay, but if you write 125, it suddenly becomes like real. It upgraded my home recording studio greatly. And I was working on a show based on the classic Lewis Carroll characters, which I love Alice. I love that stuff. So here I'm writing songs for Alice, I'm writing songs for the Mad Hatter, I'm writing songs for Tweedledee and Tweedledum and the Red Queen, and it was something like, wow, the fact that I get to put my mark creatively on this eternal project was really cool to me. It was really cool. And what could be better than to get paid reasonably well, to stay home and work on a Disney family show when you have a 2- and 3-year-old son who was watching the show, and it was great. It was, in some ways, it was my favorite gig of all time. In some ways it was. And there were episodes, there were 4 songs in every half-hour episode. And there were some shows where I wrote all 4 songs. I was very prolific, and they liked my work. Andy Copley, the producer, was like, well, Bill give more to Bill if he can handle it. And I really could handle it. I didn't write the lyrics. You would get the script, and it would say, Alice sings a country song, and there would be the lyric, or there would be the title. A lot of times it would just be the title. And so, I play a lot of instruments, and it was a joy. And I got nominated for an Emmy for that, and that was nice. I think we lost to Animaniacs, but I had done an episode of Animaniacs that year anyway. Yeah, that was a really nice gig, and I enjoyed it very much.
What did it feel like to get nominated for an Emmy? What did that mean to you?
Nothing. I mean, you know what? I don't want to say it meant nothing, but it kind of did mean nothing. I've been a voting member of the Academy of Motion Picture Arts and Sciences since I was 21. Very cool club to be a part of. Very cool, right? There's only like 6, even today, there's only like 6,000 in the actors branch. And, I get to vote for the Oscars, and that's a cool thing. I get that. But I never kind of get the fact that, wait a minute, Dustin Hoffman in Rain Man is competing with Bill Murray, and it's not a competition. It's just, how can you make it a competition? How can you say this is best? I don't want to be disrespectful to the opportunities to get an Emmy or an Oscar or a Grammy or any of that stuff, but awards just don't truly resonate that much with me. If you gave me one, great, I'll put it on my mantle, and if you don't give me one, great, I'll put something else on my mantle. It really doesn't mean that much to me, awards.
So let's talk about Babylon 5.
Okay.
How did you become involved with that show?
I auditioned for it. Babylon 5, it's kind of funny, actually. My wife and I booked a local holiday. We were taking the train down to San Diego. It was no big thing, but we had booked our hotels, and we were just going to go down to San Diego for, 4 or 5 days and just take a little chill time. And my agents at the time, who were less than impressive, honestly, called and said, you have an audition for a syndicated show. It's a science fiction show. And I was like, okay, well, I've got plans. Well, you have an audition. And I remember Eileen looked at me and she said, well, my wife Eileen said, we can change. We can always go to San Diego. It's sci-fi. you're a sci-fi guy. Go ahead, go on the audition. And I went in, and I got the scenes, and all I knew, there had been a pilot, but I hadn't seen it. And all I knew was that this character had been raised in he was an alien, and he had been raised in a monastery. He was kind of a spiritual, naive guy who'd never been out of this small, protective environment, and now he was suddenly thrust into this big community of multi-planetary beings, and he was there to serve this being from his planet as an ambassador, as an ambassadorial aide, and everything was like, he was in awe of everything. So I played him in the audition, I played him as the character of Lanier. I played him as a cross between David Carradine's Kane from Kung Fu and young Billy Mumy kind of Huckleberry Finnish was my choice. And I went in, and that's how I played him, and there was, the handful of producers, and it wasn't at a studio. It was at a hot tub factory that had been turned into like this little private, we're making a television series out here in Sun Valley. It wasn't an impressive place to go to, and I wasn't familiar with much of anybody's, obviously, Joe Straczynski and Doug Netter and these people had great, impressive resumes, but you know what, I wasn't really aware of them, and it was like, I'm going out here for this syndicated show, okay, here's my audition, blah, 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 bye. And I get this call the next day, I guess, or maybe 2 days later, from my agent at the time. And he tells me for the first time, it's a 5-year, it's a series. I thought I was just reading for a guest shot on a syndicated show, right? It didn't seem like a big deal to me. It was just, okay, I'm reading a couple of scenes. It's a guest shot on a syndicated show. The money's not going to be very good, blah, blah, blah. And he's not a human. So I get this call. They want to, it's a series deal. They want to make a 5-season deal with you. And they want to close it by 6 o'clock. Now, my wife was pregnant with our daughter. My son was 3. I hadn't been working very much as an actor at that point in time. And I say to Eileen, wow, I didn't know it was going to be a series thing. I thought it was just a guest shot. No, it's 5 seasons, blah, blah, blah. And honestly, the money wasn't really, it wasn't like big-time showbiz money, which is, it's money, but it wasn't like, you're kidding, impressive money. So I say to my agent, well, what does this guy look like? Because I know he's not a human being. I've grown up on Lost in Space and everything else.
Can I actually interrupt you? We need to just change the battery.
Sorry.
So, sorry about that.
As Sonny and Cher said, man, the beat goes on.
So you were talking about getting the role of Lanier and how you came to realize that it was for the series.
Yes, right. So, yes, I get this call, and they want to close the deal by 6 o'clock. And I knew he wasn't a human being. I knew he was an alien. So I said, what does he look like? And I got no answer. I got no answer whatsoever. So for the second time in my entire career, I bypassed an agent, I picked up the phone, and I called John Copeland, who was the producer, not the executive producer, but he was the actual, daily producer of the show. And this was like 5 o'clock, and I called him, I got him on the phone, I said, hey, John, Mumy here, I'm flattered, I didn't know it was a series thing. This guy's not a human. I'm telling you now, I will not and cannot wear lenses. I won't put lenses in my eye. And I want to know how long I'm going to be in the chair. Because they wouldn't send me an image. Because I played a Minbari from the planet Minbar. And in the pilot episode that they had shot, there were Minbari, but they were changing that look dramatically. So they didn't want to send me from what the pilot had looked like, because it was much more extreme than what it was going to be. So I say to John Copeland, how long am I going to be in the chair? And John Copeland says to me, about an hour. I say, okay, thanks. I get off the phone, I say to my wife, he says, it's about an hour. You know, I was there when we were doing Planet of the Apes. I was in the chair when they turned Will Robinson into Dr. Smith. I know what an hour in the chair means. It can't be that bad. It can't be. And as I said, we were pregnant with our daughter, and it was science fiction, which I really gravitate to and I like. So my wife and I said, well, let's do it. Let's do it. Close the deal. So I call back to my agents. Seriously, you know, it's very depressing when I get into representation levels because, anyway. So we accept the deal. Okay, I go to work. Day one, I show up in the makeup room. There is an actress who was cast to play an alien, not a Minbari, but whatever, a Narn. And as I am showing up in the makeup room, she is freaking out, she is crying, and she is saying, I can't do it, I can't do it, I can't do it. And John Copeland and Joe Straczynski all are coming in, and I don't know really who's who. I know, you know, who's Joe, who's John, who's Doug. I mean, I met them at the audition, and, you know, all I know is these are the guys. They're all coming in, telling her, don't worry, it's going to be great, it's going to be great. And she bolts. She goes, nope, can't do it, and quits. And this is before I've started to sit down. They get another actress. An hour later, there's another gal who took that part, and she's fine. Sure, turn me into a lizard. Now, this was my initial energy, and it was intense. It was really intense. I mean, she was freaking out. Obviously, she wanted that job, and she just couldn't deal with it. So I sit down in the chair with the mantra in my head that John Copeland had said to me on the phone, about an hour. 4.5 hours later, I look at myself and I am now Lanier, the Minbari. 4.5 hours later. I have a 4-year-old son. My wife is pregnant with our daughter. Honestly, I don't need the money. My father invested my earlier work well for me. I don't need the money. I wanted the money, but I don't need the money. And 4.5 hours it takes to turn me into this character. And I'm a professional guy. I've been doing this since I was 5 years old. And I don't want to repeat to these people what I just saw. I don't want to freak out and go, I'm out of here, right? Joe Straczynski comes up to me and says, you look great. And I said to him, can I tell you something? And he said, sure. I said, I don't know if I can do this. I said, you know, John told me an hour, and this took 4.5 hours. And I really don't know if I can do this. And I asked for a meeting with them before we shot 1 second of film. And I don't know how many actors would ever have kind of taken this perspective. I said, look, I'm here, and I will honor my agreement to be here. But if you guys have a plan for this guy to, like, become the guy, I can't do it. I won't do it. I said, I'm not going to do this every day. I won't. I said, so I don't know how many actors are going to tell you, don't make me the guy. But I'm telling you, if you have a plan that this is going to be the guy, you got to get somebody else, because I won't do it. And so Straczynski said to me, there will be some episodes you don't work in at all. There will be some episodes you work a day in, and there will be some episodes you work every day in. And he was true to that. And I did it for 5 years and 110 shows. And the talented craftsmen at Optic Nerve, the alien makeup people, were great people. Wonderful, wonderful, nice, generous, talented people. And they got the process of becoming Lanier from 4.5 hours down to 2 hours, which is a big difference. But I have to say, I have to be honest about it, I never acclimated to wearing that makeup. It was incredibly restricting. I couldn't hear a thing. I had foam rubber over my ears, little ears glued onto my neck, but my actual ears were underneath a bald cap and then a foam rubber bone. Taking it, it was 5 years. It became a ritual of, you're in this makeup chair at like 4 o'clock in the morning, 4:30 in the morning. First of all, I got 2 little kids at home. I'm waking up at 3:30, 4 o'clock in the morning for a 4:30, 5 o'clock call. I'm going to work, and I'm sitting in the makeup chair, and it became this ritual of, okay, I've made a 90-minute tape, cassette, of mixed music. I'm sitting there. I'm not sleeping, but I'm going to just listen to the music. I'm just going to sit there, and you're going to do what you do. And you're going to put glue all over my forehead, and you're going to put glue all over the side of my face, and you're going to glue this rubber to my face, and you're going to glue this rubber to my neck. Then you're going to put this heinous spun rubber bone over my head and glue it on. And 12 or 13 hours later, you're going to take it off. Taking it off was much worse than putting it on. Because when you put it on, you kind of close your eyes. It's the middle of the night or the early morning, and you're just kind of forgetting about it. Taking it off, you have to sit there with 2 washcloths over your eyes like this while these very nice people and very talented craftsmen start pouring these solvents on your skin and peeling this rubber off your face. And you can't get any of these solvents in your eyes, or you'll be really fucked up. So you're just sitting there like this while they're peeling this shit off your face. It was unpleasant. I had a tremendous amount of input into the arc and the development of the character of Lanier. When we started Babylon 5, I was writing the Lost in Space comic book. Joe Straczynski and Harlan Ellison, who was a creative consultant on the show, were both reading that book. They were reading it, and they respected it, and they liked it. I had a television series called Space Cases in development already. Like it wasn't, we hadn't shot the pilot, but it was a done in development deal at Nickelodeon. So I was on their I was in their club. I created a television show. I had written television shows. I was writing a science fiction comic book, and I was a producer on a show. So I got their kind of camaraderie and respect as I'm on that team. And of course, I'm also working for them as a chess piece on the other side of that table. It was an interesting place for me to be, because as an actor, I'm their chess piece. They move me around as they want. It's not my place to say anything more than Joe Straczynski's brilliant scripts. He didn't need any help from me. He is a great writer, But he came to me. I went to Joe very early on after a couple episodes, and I suggested some major arc changes or growth for my character, for Lanier. I said, you have to be into the show, but I said, besides the fact that he's really loyal to Delenn and would take a bullet for her and he's very respectful of her, I think he's truly, deeply in love with her. He's in love with this woman. He can't do anything about it. It's unrequited love, but he's in love with her. And Straczynski said to me, let me think about that. He came back the weekend. It was a weekend. He came back on Monday, and we talked, and he said, I think that's great. It's Lancelot. It's Lancelot and Guinevere, and it's good. So let's play that. But we're not going to drop that card for a long time, which is such a great thing about Babylon 5. All these characters had these major arcs in place. He had an overview of 5 seasons before he started season 1, things were liquid and things changed, but he had a basic overview of the entire novel of this show that he had created and envisioned. And that's a very cool thing. And he had a great tenacity to hang on to his control of it. And I respect that very much. And I was grateful that I had that input, because really the whole thrust of Lanier's arc is this unrequited love that leads him to go into this dark side, et cetera, et cetera. So I was probably, without a shadow of a doubt, I know I was the only actor who had that kind of input into his character. And that was because he knew I was a writer at the beginning of this process, and I was a producer, and he allowed me that kind of extra input, which I'm grateful for. But I have to say, in the 5 years I did that show, I never, ever, ever was comfortable in the physicality of that job. I really wasn't. It was hard. I mean, you know, you see people going to war and they're in Afghanistan, or you see people building a pyramid, 25,000 years ago, and you go, that's hard. Going to Sun Valley and putting on a dress and pretending you come from the planet Minbar isn't hard. But for me, for this guy, it was hard. I got to tell you, it was really, really hard. And I'm glad I stuck it out. I think it will stand the test of time as a really quality science fiction project with a beginning, middle, and an end. And I'm friends with a lot of those people that I worked with in those days to this day. But I wouldn't want to do it again.
Did you ever think of not sticking it out? Was
Yes.
there ever a point?
Yeah.
Did you ever go so far as to say you weren't going to stick it out? Or?
No. No. You know why? With all respect to Joe Straczynski, I really did create the bulk of Lanier. I didn't create who he is and where he comes from and the backstory, but I created where he was going, and I felt a real allegiance to he was a wonderful character. He was a wonderful character for an actor to play, because so much of what he did was quiet. So much of what he did was just in his eyes. But it was internalized. It really was internalized. Just talking about it, I feel the pain of his unrequited love. I really do. I know that sounds silly, but right now I'm connected to that guy. And he was a soulful guy. And he was a formidable guy. He could be a real warrior. He was a great character to play, and I respected him, and I wanted to honor him. And I wanted to see him through his story. I was very unhappy with the way his story ended. And I think that was a personal thing, a little jab at me, because I just think it was. But that's okay. It's still an interesting way to end the character,
So let's talk about Lanier from beginning to end. So describe him, where he started and how he evolved. But in that also, if you do know kind of what his trajectory was going to be, because having watched the show, Lanier without Lanier loving Delenn, I don't see any storyline at all for Lanier. So
he was an attaché. He was an aide to Delenn. He was somebody there to, I think, deliver exposition, to say this is what's happening on Minbar, or this is what's happening with this to her, and she makes a decision on how to deal with it, and he carries out her wishes. So that's really all he was. But he I liked the fact that he came from this deeply spiritual place, and I liked the fact that he was. Because if you watch the first season of Babylon 5, I really played it like if I was having a conversation with anybody in that cast, I was still like, whoa, what's that? As I'm walking down a hallway, it's like everything he sees, he's been raised in a monastery. He's like a monk who suddenly goes to Manhattan or something. It was like everything caught his eye. Everything was really interesting to him. So it was fun as an actor to play with that. And I had nothing to do with creating that. That was my choice in terms of how to play what I picked up from the script. But But the absolute love for Delenn, that was all me. That all came from me. And if you do go back and watch that show, you'll see it so early. You'll see it by the end of the first season. You'll just see the way he aches when somebody else is with her. Mira Furlan is a wonderful actress. Bruce Boxleitner is a really good actor, and a lot of those scenes are between the three of us, and I'm proud of that work. It's mature work for me, and I was happy to, when I was doing Will Robinson and things like that, it was just on the natch. It was just on the natural. Lanier took a lot of thought. I'm not a method actor. I'm not a guy who has to write a biography and go through all of those changes. But here was a guy that was kind of a blank canvas, and I really thought him out. I really thought about this guy. So I was like a parent. And I cared about him, and I wanted to honor him and see him through. And he went through some changes I just think were wrong. But, it's not my place.
In terms of his betrayal of Sinclair?
Absolutely. Of Sheridan.
Of Sheridan, I'm sorry.
Yeah. Because here's the thing, we won't go into this for long, but we had seen over the course of that, certainly he had this arc from being a quiet little doe-eyed character to now I'm on the War Council, to now I'm in charge of this White Star battleship. I'm in a war and I'm calling the shots, to I'm saving like Will, in a sense. Lanier saved people a lot on Babylon 5. He did something that, he was a hero. And, of course, on my 40th birthday, my son, who was 5, came to visit me, and that was the day that suddenly, out of nowhere, Lanier is spin-kicking and doing martial arts with a cape. It was like, yes, I finally got my cape, thank you. And it was a black cape, like Zorro's, thank you. Oh, I loved that. And this is entertaining, I get, but I can't tell you how true, how truly getting that cape meant to me. It's silly, but it meant a lot to me. But we had seen Lanier sacrifice his well-being and almost die to save the life of Peter Jurasik's character, Londo, who was the epitome of a Nazi war criminal at the time. So we've seen that this noble character would sacrifice his own life for any life form. Jump ahead to the 5th season. Lanier sees Sheridan in this life or death situation. But if you pull back and widen and look at that shot, there's also a fellow Ranger in that chamber. There's a Ranger. He's a Ranger. He's a Ranger. He's the Bone Ranger, right? He would have saved that guy, even if he would have saved Sheridan too. And he would have saved Sheridan so that he could have gone to Delenn and say, don't you get it? I saved him again. I'm the guy. It's me. It's not him. It's me. I love you, right? I saved him again. I pulled his butt out of the bacon. It's me. He wouldn't really have been selfish like that, but he would have saved Sheridan as a gift to Delenn because he loved Delenn so much and he knew she loved him, so he would have done that for her because his love was truly pure. And, he chose to let this fellow Ranger and Sheridan die. And then he changes his mind and goes back like a wimp to undo it, and it's too late because Sheridan's already gotten himself out of the mess. And then he turns to the dark side and goes off and banishes himself like a whiny wimp. I wasn't happy with the end.
So why do you think that decision was made to do? Because it just seemed so out of character. Why do you think that decision was made to do that?
It's best to ask Joe Straczynski that question, not me.
Okay. So let's talk about Lanier's costume in general. How did that add to your physical limitations on the show?
Oh, they were very comfortable.
Oh, were they?
Oh, they were really. Lanier's costumes over the 5 seasons were pretty much like pajamas, like Arabian pajamas. Mm-hmm. They were very comfortable. I liked them. I thought that the costuming department did a real good job and it was comfortable. And when I finally got the Rangers outfit in the Cape, like I said, man, I couldn't have been happier.
Yeah. You talked a little bit about Mira Furlan, but talk more about working with her.
Mira and I developed a relationship that was similar to Lanier and Delenn. Sometimes reversed, but I was taking care of her. She was from Yugoslavia. She was a big star in Eastern Europe, like a truly respected. To this day, she has an apartment in Zagreb that the government, a nice apartment that's hers whenever she wants to be there or is there. She was big news over there. She comes to the United States. She's unaware. She's the naive one. She's like, wow, show business. What is, what really is this? She couldn't drive. I drove her home. She lived pretty close to me. I live in Laurel Canyon. At the time, she lived off Fountain, maybe 2 miles from my house, and I drove her home every day. And then she finally learned to drive, and I sold her my car. Mira is a very, 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 very sensitive woman, and she has gone through, war. And she's gone through a lot of the things that we all go through, losing our parents and all that stuff at an earlier age than a lot of us go through. She's known a lot of drama, and she internalizes that, and she's a very powerful actress. We became really, really good friends, and we still are good friends. And working opposite her was powerful, because we gave it to each other. It was real. I mean, and sometimes acting is, it's you memorize your lines and you do it, and you kind of know how you're going to do it, and you do it, and it's fun, and it's done. Rockford Files. I'm coming to do my little schmooze, blah, 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 blah. The chemistry and the depth of that stuff between Lanier and Delenn was pretty real. It was pretty intense.
We won't go through all of the cast because it's such a huge ensemble.
It is.
But what was the atmosphere like on set in general with the cast members?
Babylon 5 was a very impressively produced show. If you can imagine 110 episodes without one forced call on any actor ever, with all the makeup we had to deal with and the guest cast had to deal with a series cast of 12 people all the time, plus the auxiliary characters that were brought in. Never one forced call, ever. Never went more than I would say the very latest Babylon 5 ever wrapped was probably 9 o'clock at night. And I don't think we ever went a day over schedule. We went into the 5th season. They cut our schedule down a day. Didn't matter. That crew got it done on time. It was really impressively produced in terms of efficiency. And there was camaraderie because it was the little show that could, because we weren't Star Trek. We were the syndicated sci-fi show that was getting this great internet buzz, and hardcore sci-fi community was really talking about it. But in terms of big-time show business, it was kind of like, what? Where is it? What is it? I think I've heard of it. Huh? So we had this team spirit. We really did. And after the 2nd season, I think we really all felt like we want to do this for Joe, because he had his story, and he really wanted to tell it. And he was very adamant about not stretching his story. I mean, Babylon 5 could have gone 6, 7 seasons. And he was like, nope, it's a 5-season story. We have other things to do. We can do them in Crusade or whatever we else call it. But Babylon 5, I said 5 seasons, and I mean it. He's very much a man of his word. So we were pulling for Joe for a while. For most of the 3rd and 4th season was, it was a good team. Nobody ever acted out. And I'll tell you something, in terms of the way it was produced, there was a couple of days, like, you know, just a couple of days, and I won't name who, but one of the cast members, you know, started to get a little fabulous.
We ran out of tape.
Oh, sorry.
No, that's okay.
I don't even need to